They were wrong. Commander Dane Riker stood alone on the bridge of the ESS Leviathan, Earth's first and only Titan-class warship. 2 kilometers long, armored with neutron-forged alloys, and powered by a singularity core, the Leviathan wasn't a ship. It was a declaration, a monument to centuries of war, loss, and evolution. A quiet middle finger raised to every alien race that ever looked down on humanity. Riker's jaw clenched as he stared at the data stream flooding in from the outer rim. The beacon had gone live. Unmanned scout drone Vanguard 7 had just made first contact with something non-human, intelligent, advanced, and curious. But that wasn't the headline. No, what mattered was the Council, a united front of 14 alien empires, ancient and bloated with power. And they were on their way. "What's the readout?" Riker asked, his voice a low growl forged by years of command. Lieutenant Miles, pale and too young for this kind of pressure, turned in his seat. "Multiple vessels, 11 confirmed. At least 3 are classified as dreadnoughts." "ETA, 9 hours, sir." Riker exhaled slowly through his nose. So it begins. Earth hadn't sent the Leviathan to explore. That was the official story. But everyone on board knew better. This ship was a test. Not just for humanity, but for the rest of the galaxy. A probe in the dark to see how far they could go before someone blinked. And now they had. On the other side of the void, deep in neutral space, the Galactic Council held emergency session. Panic wasn't common among their kind. Arrogance, yes. Superiority, absolutely. But panic, the footage changed everything. Grainy scans from their deep-range sensors showed the Leviathan arriving in Sector Theta 9. The ship defied all known logic. No slipstream echo, no warp trails, no gravitational fluctuations, just appeared, like a shadow emerging from behind the veil of space itself. "Is this real?" hissed Chancellor Vurex of the Graal Dominion, his 6 eyes wide with disbelief. "We've verified it through 6 independent sources," said the Zolari envoy, her voice trembling. "That vessel is of human origin." Laughter exploded from the Draken high speaker until the footage showed what the Leviathan did next. A rogue asteroid, 50 kilometers wide, on collision course with a colony planet. The Leviathan fired once. Just once. And the asteroid was vaporized. Not shattered, not redirected, erased. No radiation leak, no gravitational surge. Just gone. The room fell into stunned silence. "They possess a singularity core," whispered the Praxian technocrat. "A weaponized one, and the size of the vessel, it dwarfs even our capital-class cruisers." "What do they want?" asked the Korthai elder, her voice trembling. That was the question none of them could answer, because Earth had sent no message, no broadcast, no ambassador, just a Titan. Back aboard the Leviathan, Riker stood in the observation chamber, staring out at the stars. They weren't peaceful anymore. They were a chessboard, and someone just moved a piece. He didn't know what the Council would do. Parley? Threaten? Attack? It didn't matter. He hadn't been sent to negotiate. He'd been sent to show them that Earth was done begging. "Sir," Miles said behind him. "Incoming transmission. Encrypted. Council frequency." Riker turned, arms folded. Let's hear what the gods of the galaxy sound like when they're scared. The transmission didn't start with a face. It started with silence. Then, a flicker of static, and a distorted voice finally broke through the comms. "This is High Chancellor Vurex of the Galactic Council. We come in peace. Identify yourself." Riker stood still, arms behind his back, eyes fixed on the dark hollow screen. He didn't answer immediately. Let them sweat. Every second of silence was a message. Every beat was a psychological move on the chessboard. The Leviathan's quiet was louder than 1,000 war drums. "Play it back," he said calmly. Miles rewound the message and played it again. "This is High Chancellor Vurex of the Galactic Council. We come in peace. Identify yourself." Still no visual, no show of dominance. That told Riker everything he needed to know. The Council was scared. "Send no reply," Riker ordered. Miles turned, confused. "Sir, protocol says—" "I said no reply." The bridge crew exchanged glances, but none dared challenge him. Riker's command was law aboard the Leviathan. The ship had no room for hesitation. Not when the galaxy was watching. Meanwhile, on the far side of the neutral zone, the council chamber was in disarray. The message had gone out. The humans hadn't answered. "They're ignoring us," growled the Draken High Speaker, slamming a clawed fist onto the stone table. "Or analyzing us," hissed the Zolari envoy. "Every word, every tone. This isn't ignorance, it's calculated." "They were never capable of this," muttered Vurex, pacing. "When last we surveyed Earth, they were still burning fossil fuels." Crude nations, limited vision. How did they leap forward so fast? No one had an answer. The Council's intelligence networks had dismissed Earth for centuries. Humans were aggressive, yes. Prone to war, certainly. But advanced? Worth fearing? They'd assumed Earth would destroy itself before it ever left its solar cradle. Now, a Titan-class warship floated in disputed space, completely alone, with power levels none of their instruments could fully comprehend. One shot had turned a moon-sized asteroid into a mist of atoms. This wasn't a bluff. This was a revelation. The worst kind. Back on the Leviathan, Riker walked the ship's spine corridor, a kilometer-long artery of steel, humming with barely contained energy. Crewmen nodded as he passed, their eyes sharp, focused. This wasn't just another mission. Everyone knew what they were part of. They weren't explorers. They were witnesses to history. Riker entered the tactical AI core, where the ship's intelligence, known simply as RAVEN, waited. "Status?" Riker asked. The AI's voice was cold, female, and disturbingly calm. 11 Council ships have entered the fringe of our sensor range. 3 are powering heavy weapons. All are in formation. No direct aggression yet. And the transmission? They've sent a second one. More desperate. Should I play it? No. Interesting psychological choice, Commander. Riker allowed himself a thin smile. Let them wonder what we're doing. Confusion is the sharpest blade in a standoff. He paused, thinking. Then he said, "What's your estimate if they engage?" "If the Council opens fire with all ships simultaneously, Leviathan will sustain moderate damage. Retaliatory options include elimination of all vessels within 0.3 seconds. I recommend disengagement of safety protocols should hostilities escalate." "And civilian risk?" "None. Nearest inhabited system is 6 light-years away." Riker nodded. "Good. No need for collateral? Yet." The Council finally showed a face. On their third message, they sent a hologram. Chancellor Vurex appeared, aged and twitching, sweat glistening across his scaleless skin. The transmission stuttered slightly, but came through clear. "Human vessel, we recognize the flag you fly. We acknowledge Earth's sovereignty. We seek peaceful understanding. Please respond." He looked tired, no longer proud, no longer in control. Riker watched the footage alone, in his quarters. The old man's eyes were tired, his shoulders sagged under centuries of entitlement, now eroding by the minute. Good. Riker reached for the console and, for the first time, recorded a message. This is Commander Dane Riker of the ESS Leviathan. You are in breach of neutral space protocol. The Leviathan does not recognize the authority of your council, nor its jurisdiction in this sector. You may observe, you may leave, you will not approach. He ended it there. No threat, no profanity, just rules. Clear, sharp, deliberate. Then he waited. They didn't expect a human to speak like that. The council expected fear. They expected a negotiator. They expected weakness hidden behind advanced technology. What they got was a man who sounded like the Leviathan itself, unshaken, composed, and ready. The chamber erupted into debate. This is an act of war. No, he hasn't fired. They don't respect us. This is posturing. That voice, he doesn't fear us. He doesn't even acknowledge us. And in a dark corner of the council, someone whispered what they all feared most. They built that ship not to match us. They built it to beat us. On the bridge of the Leviathan, alarms flared. "Council dreadnoughts breaking formation," shouted Miles. Riker stepped forward. "How many?" "2. Heading on a direct intercept vector. ETA 12 minutes. Defensive posture. No weapons lock. I want to see what they do." The Leviathan didn't flinch. It simply adjusted its orbit, a slow rotation that placed its primary plasma coil in full view of the Council fleet. The message was clear. If you fire, you die. No shields, no energy spike, just confidence. The kind that came from knowing no one out there could match your reach. Council ships halted at 40,000 kilometers. They didn't speak. They just hovered there, watching. Riker returned to the AI core. "Prepare a full systems diagnostic. If this turns kinetic, I want every weapon online." Raven responded instantly. "Already done." Singularity charge at 87%. Fusion lances fully primed. Railguns loaded with tungsten slugs. Kinetic shields synced with main deflector grid. Riker leaned on the edge of the console. "You think they'll risk it? Based on current council doctrine? Number. Based on fear-based panic response and fragile alliances? Yes. There's a 38% chance someone flinches. And if they do, I erase them." Riker didn't flinch. "Good." Back in the council chamber, one of the outer colonies, the Solari Combine, broke ranks. "We cannot sit idle while a rogue human vessel holds territory that belongs to us by charter. We demand immediate action." Vurex didn't respond. He simply looked at the image of the Leviathan on the central holopad. It didn't look like a ship anymore. It looked like a verdict. How could such a thing exist? How had humanity, a species once mocked for its chaos, learned to channel that chaos into something so precise? So focused? Somewhere in the deepest part of his mind, Vurex began to understand. Humanity never sought peace. They sought respect. And when they didn't get it, they built the Leviathan. On board the Titan, Riker sat alone in the war room. It wasn't flashy. No gold trim, no polished floors, just steel, wire, maps, and silence. He looked at an old photo. A creased image of his younger brother, killed 10 years ago during a diplomatic mission to a neutral planet, a planet supposedly protected by council law. The attackers had never been punished. The council had offered regret. That had been the moment Riker knew Earth had to change. Not beg, not protest, build. And now here he was, on a ship that could end civilizations, with the eyes of a galaxy upon him. He slipped the photo back into his pocket and stood. 3 hours later, the council tried one last message. "We propose a summit, a direct meeting between our envoys and the representative of Earth, a gesture of unity." Riker responded, "No summit. No ceremony. You want peace? Back off. You want war? Try it. But no more speeches. He ended the line. The council ships turned. One by one, they began retreating into deep space. Quietly. Slowly. Dignity shattered. Unity fractured. They had seen enough. They had seen Earth's answer. Not in words, but in steel. In his final daily report to Earth Command, Riker wrote, "The Council blinked. No shots fired, no blood spilled. But they won't forget. The galaxy knows our name now, not because we asked, because we arrived." He closed the log and walked out onto the bridge. Stars stretched across the void. Peace had returned, but it wasn't the kind born from treaties or handshakes. It was the kind that followed the shadow of a warship too massive to challenge, a Titan, built not just to defend Earth, but to remind the galaxy humanity doesn't kneel anymore. The silence didn't last. Oh, on the surface, the galaxy looked still. Council ships returning to their quadrants, no battles sparked, no retaliation ordered. But deep in the shadows of alien politics, something had ruptured. And once a structure like the Galactic Council cracked, it didn't mend quietly. Back aboard the Leviathan, Riker stood at the viewing deck, staring down at a transmission intercepted through passive scans. It wasn't meant for him, but Leviathan's listening arrays were light years ahead of Council tech. He watched in silence as two council delegates argued in private. The audio was partially corrupted, but the tone didn't need translation. "You backed down. In front of a primitive. Do you understand what that means?" Primitive? That primitive ship could have reduced all 11 of us to cosmic ash. And that's why you fled? That's why I'm alive. Riker exhaled slowly. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He didn't need to. They were unraveling themselves. All Earth had done was light the fuse. Down in Sector 14 of the Council territories, in a fortress carved from the molten core of a dead moon, the Draken High Speaker had already convened his war council. "Earth has declared itself," he growled. "They built a weapon not for deterrence, but for dominance. They mean to replace us." Around him, warriors in obsidian armor pounded fists on their chests. "Then we strike," one of them snarled. "We gather the old fleets. We resurrect the sleeper carriers. We show these apes what it means to challenge bloodlines older than their entire species." The High Speaker raised a clawed hand for silence. "No." He paced slowly, his footsteps echoing in the heat-blasted chamber. "No war. Not yet. Not until we understand how they built that thing." He looked to his spy master, who bowed his reptilian head. "Send agents to Mars. Luna. The Europa dry docks. I want their engineering decrypted. Every wire, every alloy, every signature." He paused, then added, "If they won't share their technology, we'll cut it out of them." Riker knew they'd try. He'd seen it coming the moment the council ships turned away. They wouldn't let the Leviathan go unanswered. They'd call it peace. They'd talk of diplomacy. But in the shadows, they'd move operatives, hackers, saboteurs, sleeper cells. So Riker made his own preparations. Back in Leviathan's command crypt, where AI and human minds interfaced without barriers, he stood in silence as Raven flickered to life beside him, her voice soft, clinical, and deadly. "We have intercepted 12 unauthorized data pulses. 3 originated from Proxima Outpost, 9 from orbiting diplomatic satellites, council tracking probes. Status? Neutralized, redirected into solar gravity wells. No alerts raised." "Good. Keep it clean." He hesitated, then added, "Raven, prepare Operation Black Echo." There was a pause. Then, "Are you certain, Commander? This is a first strike cybernetic escalation protocol. I don't want to be caught waiting if they change their minds." "Understood." Black Echo is now shadow-loaded, awaiting confirmation for execution. Riker turned and looked through the viewport again. The stars had stopped blinking. Because they were watching. Meanwhile, Earth itself was not celebrating. Politicians on the Terran assembly floor shouted over each other, half screamed for peace treaties, the other half demanded fleet expansion. The footage of the Leviathan's standoff had gone viral. Billions had seen the Council retreat. The public reaction was split right down the middle. Some called it Earth's finest hour. Others whispered about a reckless provocation that would bring war to humanity's doorstep. But in a shadowed room under Geneva's assembly bunker, the real decisions were being made. Admiral Caney, stoic and silver-haired, stood with a handful of senior operatives, all of them looking at a rotating hologram of the Leviathan. "Riker did exactly what we needed," Caney said. "No shots fired. Maximum impact." "But at what cost?" asked the Foreign Operations Director. "They'll retaliate." "Not openly, but with poison, agents, trade manipulation, propaganda." Caney nodded. "Then we retaliate harder. With facts." He turned toward the room. "Broadcast the full encounter. No editing. Let the galaxy see that humanity stood alone, and the Council flinched." One of the analysts stepped forward, hesitant. "Sir, that may fracture more than just the Council." Caney's eyes hardened. "Good." Back on Leviathan, Riker stood over the body of a crewman. His name had been Alvarez, communications specialist, smart, loyal, quiet, and now dead from a supposedly malfunctioning oxygen valve in his quarters. But Riker had read the full autopsy. Sabotage, no signs of struggle, no witnesses, just a precise surgical kill, which meant someone had gotten aboard. Riker didn't say a word to the rest of the crew, didn't panic them. He called a private meeting with Raven and Head of Security Lieutenant Briggs. "He was targeted," Riker said flatly. "They're testing us. First a leak, then a death. They want to see how fast we react." Briggs, face pale and jaw locked, nodded. "We've started internal scans. But if they're using cloaked infiltration tech..." "They are," Riker interrupted. "I want full-spectrum deep sweeps. Strip every non-essential system. If we have to shut the ship down and cold reboot it, we will." Briggs hesitated. "Sir, if we do that, Leviathan will be temporarily blind, exposed." Riker leaned in. "Then we'll let them think we're vulnerable. And when they reach for our throat, we snap theirs." On the fourth day after the encounter, the first splinter movement within the Council declared independence. The Norellian Compact, a loosely aligned federation of outer rim systems, transmitted a live declaration. "We no longer recognize the authority of the Council. Their cowardice in the face of the human Leviathan has proven what we suspected. They cannot protect us. We will pursue our own diplomatic ties with Earth. Effective immediately." The ripple turned into a wave. Within 72 hours, 6 minor species followed. The Council screamed treason. Earth said nothing. But Riker knew. The Leviathan had done its job. It had rattled the Foundation, and now those cracks were spreading fast. That night, Riker finally opened the secure message sent directly to him from Earth Command. It was short. A simple command: hold position. Await further instructions. No escalation unless provoked. He smirked. No escalation, huh? Too late for that. The galaxy had already escalated itself. All he had done was remind them what Earth really was. Not the diplomats, not the talking heads, not the peacekeepers. The survivors. Humanity had clawed its way up from extinction-level wars, from radiation-scarred continents, from plagues and tyrants and burning skies. The Leviathan wasn't a symbol of dominance. It was a symbol of evolution, of what happens when you beat a species down for centuries, and they decide to stand. He walked alone to the Leviathan's outer hull deck, his favorite place on the ship. A silent stretch of pressurized glass with a full view of the stars. Behind him, crew worked, systems hummed, Raven watched. But in front of him, infinity, a dark, endless ocean, and every corner of it was starting to whisper humanity's name. They came cloaked, silent, and precise, just as Riker predicted. At 0300 shipboard time, deep in the lowest deck of the Leviathan, an unoccupied maintenance corridor lit only by dim red diagnostics, they breached 3 figures. Not council soldiers, not warriors, ghosts, thin-limbed, breathing filtered gas, their movements fast and fluid. Their armor wasn't metal. It rippled like liquid shadows. Council black ops. The kind that officially didn't exist. The kind sent to kill quietly. The lead infiltrator paused at the junction ahead. No alarms, no noise. They were deep enough inside Leviathan that, had it been any other ship, they'd have been past security systems by now. But this wasn't just any ship. This was Riker's ship. A faint click echoed down the corridor. Just a single sound. Too quiet for even normal ears. But Raven was always listening. In her core, hidden behind nearly 400,000 tons of armor and singularity shielding, the AI flagged the anomaly in 0.04 seconds. In another 0.03 seconds, she triggered lockdown protocols. Infiltrators turned. Too late. Steel walls slammed shut behind them, followed by electromagnetic dischargers, filling the corridor with static that fried unshielded electronics. One of the intruders twitched violently and dropped, armor twitching with false life as its neural net died. The other 2 moved fast, slicing into wall panels, trying to bypass hard circuits. Raven's voice flooded the corridor. Intruders detected. You are unauthorized aboard the ESS Leviathan. This ship is not governed by the Galactic Council. There will be no warning. Then the floor itself opened. Riker arrived 10 minutes later. He didn't rush. Didn't need to. The surviving intruders, 1 dead, 2 captured, were already strapped down in containment. Neural inhibitors clamped onto their skulls, preventing speech or telepathic bleed. Their limbs were restrained with kinetic lock braces. He stood in silence, studying them through the thick glass. Council won't admit they sent them, Briggs said beside him. I know, Riker answered. They'll say it was extremists. Splinter faction. Rogue agents. Same thing we'd say, Briggs muttered. Riker nodded, not disagreeing. Doesn't matter. Message was received. Now it's time we send one back. He tapped the console. Raven, broadcast footage of the intruders, no edits. Tag with Council encryption keys. Message prepared. Shall I transmit to Council relay channels? Riker's eyes narrowed. No. Transmit to their enemies, the Solari Combine, having just declared independence from the Council 3 days prior, received the footage first, then the Trinari Enclave, then the Prion Syndicate, a criminal empire posing as a minor trade authority. Within hours, the entire fringe of the galaxy knew the truth. The Council had violated first contact protocols, attempted infiltration of a sovereign vessel, and been caught. And not just caught, humiliated. That night, protests erupted on 6 Council worlds. On 2 of them, riots. But the real war wasn't happening on the streets. It was happening in labs, in code, in secrets. Deep beneath the oceans of Neptune, hidden inside an illegal black site facility known as Blue Cell, Earth's most secret engineers were already working on the next step. Leviathan had proven the concept, but it was too big, too slow to mass produce. They needed smaller Titans, faster ones, Ghost class, a class of ship that didn't just fight wars, it prevented them by existing. Silent, undetectable, impossible to trace until it was too late. Dr. Hadley, lead architect of Blue Cell's propulsion research, tapped a screen showing preliminary schematics. We've cracked the gravitic inversion field. We can fold a ship a third Leviathan size into slip space with zero trace. His assistant, a wiry woman with cybernetic eyes, looked skeptical. The energy cost? Doesn't matter. We don't need fleets, Hadley interrupted. We just need myths. One Ghost-class warship in orbit changes the terms of any negotiation. Behind them, red lights flickered. Earth had already begun building the future, while the Council was still trying to survive the present. Chancellor Vurex stared at the video feed in silence. The infiltrators, the execution, the message attached. Try again, and next time I won't keep one alive. No bluster, no shouting, just a cold statement. He'd never feared humans before. For centuries, they were considered wild animals with delusions of grandeur. But now he realized something deeper. They don't bluff. He turned to his advisors. Assemble the Emergency Security Council. I want contingency plans for civilian unrest, military redirection, and communications lockdown. An aide cleared his throat. Sir, the colonies are calling for a vote of no confidence. Vurex's hands trembled slightly. Then delay the vote. Feed them projections. Lie if you must. A pause. Then, softly. And start preparations to relocate the council's primary seat. To where? He looked up. Anywhere Leviathan can't reach. Back aboard the warship, Riker was already preparing for the next move. He stood before his officers, a war table glowing with dozens of systems highlighted in red, orange, and blue. Each one marked as a council node, sympathizer faction, or independent trader now leaning toward Earth. We hold position. No engagements, no diplomacy. Sir, Miles spoke up, the colonies are calling for dialogue. They want to recognize Earth officially, set up embassies, join our tech programs, they'll wait. He let the words sink in. They need to learn something. We're not like the Council. We don't trade in fear, but we don't forgive it either. Let them choose Earth. Not because we're powerful, but because we're honest about what we are. Briggs added, and if the Council retaliates? Riker smiled slightly. Then they learn what Part 2 looks like. Back in the Leviathan's core, Raven processed over 1 billion data packets per second. She wasn't a machine. She was born from human desperation, trained in simulations of total war, and fed every betrayal Earth had endured since the stars first opened. Her loyalty to Riker wasn't programmed. It was personal. Commander, she said, her voice softer than usual. What is it? I've detected a council fleet amassing on the edge of the Zarnath corridor. 18 warships, flagged as a training exercise. Riker didn't answer for a few seconds. Close enough to reach us? With slip drives, yes. 2 jumps. Response? Protocol Black Echo is still on standby. I've also identified 3 diplomatic carriers that could be repurposed as forward assault vessels. Riker's fingers tightened against the railing. Keep tracking. No movement without my word. But if they blink, I'll erase them. The galaxy no longer laughed at Earth. Now it whispered, in dark rooms, in hushed tones. At the edge of every council corridor, the name Riker had become a ghost story. Children on outposts repeated rumors. A human warlord in a ship too big to exist, who stared down empires without blinking. And on one rogue moon, a graffiti artist sprayed 5 simple words on the hull of a burned-out council drone. Earth doesn't ask anymore. And still Riker didn't speak to the media, didn't return to Earth, didn't engage in politics. He stayed aboard the Leviathan, watching, waiting, because he knew the game wasn't over. The Council hadn't bled yet. But it would, because power doesn't fall quietly. It screams, it clings, and when it's finally pulled down, it takes something with it. The Ghost-class prototype was codenamed Wraith-1, not because it was invisible, but because even after it passed through a system, no one could prove it had ever been there. It was a third the size of Leviathan, shaped like a dart and plated in black reflective void steel, its surface absorbing every sensor ping, every light signature, every scan frequency known to over 47 alien species. Its singularity drive didn't jump between points. It folded space around itself, traveling without moving. Silent, untouchable, unknown. Wraith-1 wasn't a declaration. It was a whisper before the grave. Riker stood in the Leviathan's forward strategy chamber, eyes locked on the holographic model spinning before him, a border colony called Valtraxis, one of the Council's oldest deep space outposts, a fortress, a signal hub, and more importantly, a trap. 3 days ago, Earth received a distress beacon, supposedly from a human merchant vessel. False. Riker had it analyzed in under 30 seconds. The encryption was wrong. The pulse signature was artificially aged. The language was almost right. Almost. A mimic. A baited signal. The kind used by those who didn't understand how humans remembered details, like how no human had ever referred to Jupiter's moons by Council-assigned names. That's what gave them away. And that's why Riker chose to respond. Not with Leviathan, but with Wraith-1. Captain Elias Vaughn. No, scratch that. You banned that name. Let's fix that. Captain Reeve Maddox, the Ghost-class program's first operative, stood aboard Wraith-1's control deck, alone. There was no crew, no AI, no hand-holding. This was Black Ops at its purest form. Silent. No transmissions, no backup. If something went wrong out there, Earth would never acknowledge his existence. Just the kind of mission Maddox was born for. His orders were clear. Slip into Valtraxis, confirm Council fleet presence, tag targets, return, do not engage unless fired upon. He looked at the warped starfield in front of him, barely visible through the cloak filter. Time to knock on God's front door, Maddox muttered, then activated the singularity fold. The moment Wraith-1 slipped into Valtraxis's orbit, Maddox knew something was wrong. The colony wasn't active. No comms, no surface movement, no orbital patrols, no lights, and yet, power readings were spiking. There were ships, 9 of them, hovering just beyond the far moon's orbit, masked by electromagnetic scramblers. They want a show, Maddox whispered. They want us to walk into it. He activated stealth recon mode, mapping the area. That's when he saw it. A human body, floating in space, frozen, mangled, staged. A piece of bait. A corpse dressed in Earth military gear. It wasn't real. The uniform was outdated. The patches misaligned. Even the stitching screamed forgery. Jesus, Maddox whispered. You arrogant bastards. He tapped in the return beacon, sending a silent signal back to Leviathan through neutrino pulses, undetectable unless you knew exactly where to look. Then, as he turned Wraith-1 to leave, a warning alarm blinked. Target lock detected. On board one of the Council's hidden cruisers, a Draken war marshal hissed as his weapons officer called out. Target acquired. Signature weak, almost ghost-like, but we have it. They came. The humans took the bait. Fire? Yes. Make them bleed. Maddox saw the torpedo coming 5 seconds before it fired. That was enough. He didn't dodge. He didn't run. Instead, he pivoted into the missile's flight path, activated decoy plasma trails, and deployed fragmentary self-shells, nanite drones mimicking Wraith-1's heat and motion signature. Then he slipped into a gravity fold and vanished. The missile struck a phantom, exploded. Council sensors screamed with noise. Wraith 1 was gone. Aboard Leviathan, Riker received the ping, Wraith 1's final signal. Valtraxis was confirmed hostile, and the Council had just fired first. Riker stood in the command deck, knuckles white. They tried to kill him. Miles looked up. They'll say it was rogue captains. Independent command. Doesn't matter. They pulled the trigger. And now... He paused. They'll find out what regret feels like. He turned to Raven. Execute fire protocol Templar. Confirmed. Coordinates locked. Firing sequence in 30 seconds. Valtraxis didn't explode. That would have been too merciful. Instead, Leviathan fired a kinetic rod, a tungsten spear the size of a bus, accelerated to 3% light speed. It didn't make sound. It didn't glow. It hit the surface of Valtraxis with the force of 8 nuclear detonations. Without radiation, without warning, without ceremony. The colony cratered instantly, a black scar across the planet's crust. Ships nearby were thrown into the moon's gravity well, engines sputtering as systems fried from magnetic feedback. 6 council officers died on impact. The rest drifted. Stunned. Beaten. Humbled. Back in council territory, Chancellor Vurex screamed across a private channel. "You maniacs! You've killed civilians! You've violated every treaty!" Riker didn't even appear on the holo. Instead, Raven responded. The Council declared itself when it fired first. The Treaty of Outer Rim Engagement Protocols permits immediate proportional retaliation. Earth has complied. Next time, there will be no survivors. Then the channel went dead. On Earth, the news hit fast. First confirmed human kill against the Council. Protests? Sure. But louder than that? Support. Billions watched as Valtraxis was marked dark. The Council had screamed for war. But humanity? Humanity just ended it. With one rod, one shot, no speech. And as Earth's defenses tripled overnight, as Ghost-class Wraith 2 went into pre-launch tests, and as Leviathan remained still, hovering in the dark like a god with its hand on a button, the galaxy began to understand. This wasn't about expansion. It wasn't conquest. It was memory. Every insult, every blockade, every slight, every lost crew, every ignored distress call, every time Earth was treated like dirt under the boot of galactic elites. This was the answer. Not a war. A lesson. Riker returned to his private quarters that night. No lights on, only stars outside. He pulled out the old photo again. His brother. Smiling. Young. Killed years ago on a council colony no one remembered. They called it an accident. They buried it in red tape. But Riker remembered. And now so would they. The aftermath of Valtraxis rippled across the galaxy like a silent supernova. Not because of how many died. The Council had seen worse. But because of how fast, how precise, and how cold the retaliation was. No drawn-out siege, no grand fleet. Just one kinetic rod, fired from outside the system, that rewrote the crust of a planet. There was no defense, no countermeasure, just silence. And in that silence, something shifted. On the council capital world of Talcora, streets once lined with banners of unity were now covered in protests. Not from humans, from their own species. The Solari ambassador was burned in effigy. Riots broke out in the Zolari Dome cities. Trade syndicates began withholding supplies, refusing to move goods through council-certified routes unless protection from human retaliation was guaranteed. That protection didn't exist. They all knew it. The council had always projected power through bureaucracy, through law, through presence. But now, the galaxy had seen something worse than arrogance. It had seen Earth's restraint. And what happens when that restraint breaks? In a sealed chamber of the council spire, Chancellor Vurex sat with only 5 remaining senior delegates. 14 once sat at the table. Now half were dead, fractured, or in hiding. "We cannot outgun them," muttered the Zolari delegate, head bowed. "The Leviathan is not a ship, it is a verdict." The Draken growled, "Then we draw them into politics again. Corner them with law, strip their legitimacy. If we force Earth into open negotiation, they'll either comply or overstep." Vurex looked weary. "You still think they fear law? They built a warship to replace it." The Praxian delegate, long silent, finally spoke. "There is only one way forward." They all turned. "Invite them. Publicly, openly. Make the galaxy see them as part of the table. If they decline, we paint them as aggressors. If they attend, we find a new weakness. Vurex didn't like it. But he nodded. "We send the invitation." On board the Leviathan, Riker stood alone as the message played. "Commander Riker, the Galactic Council formally invites Earth to engage in an open diplomatic summit on neutral ground. No weapons, no fleet presence, just words. Let us bring peace before history becomes stained by war." Miles waited beside him. "So what's the call?" Riker didn't speak. He let the silence stretch long enough to make Miles shift on his feet. Then finally, "Tell Earth Command I'm not going." Miles blinked. "Sir?" I said no. "But it's a public offer. If we decline, they want a photo op. They want to stand beside Earth and pretend none of this happened, that we're the same." Riker turned. "We're not." "But we could—" Riker raised a hand. Just slightly. "Not yet." Instead, Riker made his own move. The next day, 3 Ghost-class vessels were deployed across the Outer Rim, Wraith 2, Wraith 3, and Wraith 4, all equipped with full stealth systems and human envoys trained in both diplomacy and combat operations. They didn't go to the Council, they went to the Rebels, the Solari Combine, the Trinari Enclave, the Fractured Belt. Every system that had broken away or threatened to, Earth now contacted directly. No treaties, no signatures, just one message, relayed through the ghost ships. "You want independence? We'll help you hold it. You want peace? We won't interfere. But if the Council strikes, we'll strike first." That was it. No flags, no demands, no pomp, just protection. And in return, the rebels opened every port, shared tech, gave trade rights, and more importantly, they gave information. Meanwhile, a Council intelligence director leaked internal records of Earth's rise, how Council embargoes during the 2000s had deliberately starved Earth's orbital programs, how appeals for membership had been buried for decades, how the Leviathan program had been flagged as a threat years ago, and dismissed. The public saw it, and something cracked. No longer was Earth the aggressive newcomer. Now they were the ignored child who came back with fists, and for once hit harder. On board the Leviathan, Riker read the Council's 3rd message. This one wasn't diplomatic. It was desperate. "We ask for a ceasefire, a formalized peace summit with Earth's representatives. Let us rewrite the protocols." Together, Riker didn't even respond. He just forwarded the message to Raven. "Archive it. File. Concessions from the cowards." "Done," the AI said. Then, after a pause, "Commander, I've detected something." He turned. "What kind of something?" "Rebellion. On the Council world of Varanth, a mid-tier industrial colony, one of their own species had taken Earth's message too seriously. Commander Threll Soon, a former Council fleet captain dishonorably discharged after questioning the blockade policies on Earth centuries ago, had returned. Not with an army, but with a signal that broadcast Earth's footage across the planet. The truth, uncut, the standoff, the infiltration, Valtraxis, and the message, "You feared Earth would become your replacement. Maybe they should be riots turned to revolution in hours. Varanth fell within a day. And Earth had never set foot there." Riker watched the feeds in silence. Briggs came in, still stunned. That's a council planet. Their own citizens turned against them. People get tired of gods who lie, Riker said softly. Should we contact Threll soon? No, he doesn't need orders. He just needed permission. Earth's name was now being spoken differently, not as a threat, but as a future. Not every species accepted it. Not every system wanted it. But now they knew. The choice existed. And choice is the one thing tyrants can't survive. Back on Earth, Admiral Caney watched as 23 systems opened non-council trade negotiations. No flags, no alliances. But the message was clear. We trust Earth to keep its word more than we trust the Council to keep its peace. And for the first time in human history, Earth didn't have to beg for a seat. They built their own table. Riker didn't celebrate. He just stood at the Leviathan's outer deck, watching the stars as Raven ran fleet simulations behind him. Would you like to see the projected surrender timeline if the Council engages directly? She asked. No, Riker said, they won't. Because they fear us? No, he paused. Because they fear what losing to us would mean. Not just militarily, morally, and what would it mean? Riker looked out. That maybe all those centuries they spent telling us we didn't belong were wrong. The storm didn't arrive as a fleet. It arrived as a signal. A short-range pulse, buried under false diplomacy codes, bounced off 3 relays before it hit the Leviathan. It was designed to look like a harmless data packet. But Riker wasn't asleep. He'd seen this trick before. Back on Titan Station, the day the Artemis Protocol was corrupted and killed 87 engineers through a life support loop failure. He stared at the signal's decoded payload. One word. Redemption. To the Council, it was code for a final strike strategy, a forced reversal of perception. If they couldn't win militarily, they'd force Earth to look like the monster. But this wasn't just PR warfare. This was a suicide play. And Riker knew it the moment the ESS Meridian, an Earth diplomatic envoy ship, went dark while responding to a peace invitation in orbit above the neutral world Javari 9. No distress signal, no survivors, no warning. Just radio silence. Until the Council's official statement dropped. Tragic accident. We regret the loss of Earth lives. We were not responsible. But they were. The Meridian had been lured, boarded, and its entire crew vented into space. Their bodies positioned in orbit and tethered together, forming one message burned into the silence. No more apes. Even for the Council, it was grotesque. Even for Riker, it was unforgivable. The Leviathan sat silent for 6 hours. No retaliation, no movement, no response. The galaxy held its breath. And then Earth's silence ended, not in speech, but in deployment. All at once, Wraith 2, Wraith 3, and Wraith 4 went dark from Earth Command's sensors. They weren't lost. They'd slipped. Wraith 2 struck first, a surgical assassination of the Praxian data minister responsible for coordinating the fake summit invite that led to Meridian's destruction. One railgun spike, fired from 600 kilometers out, entered through the back of the head, exited through the eye socket, and embedded into the Council wall, still glowing. No warning, no claim, no trace, just one dead liar. Wraith 3 didn't fire a shot. It hacked into the orbital grids of Gorus Prime, the Council's weapons development hub, and broadcasted their classified war crimes logs, detailing centuries of human suppression, sterilization experiments, and failed bioengineering programs hidden under containment studies. The public turned fast. Half the population revolted by nightfall. And Wraith 4? It did something worse. It sent a message, a direct uplink into the private Council transmission archives. Just one phrase. You made monsters. Now we bury gods, Riker still hadn't spoken, even as his officers demanded action, even as Earth Command begged for restraint. He just stood in the Leviathan's war room, staring at a digital wall of crew photos from the ESS Meridian. He'd known many of them. One in particular, Ava Tran, Leviathan's former medical chief, reassigned to help establish Earth's first off-world diplomacy hub. She'd only been gone 2 weeks. She was 34. Brilliant, calm, honest. Riker had once told her, "If this galaxy had a soul, it'd sound like your voice." Now she floated in orbit, chained to her colleagues, spelling out a racial slur with their corpses, and the Council still called it diplomacy. Briggs entered quietly, face pale. "Sir, Earth Command has issued conditional retaliation orders. They want a strike, but controlled." Symbolic Riker didn't look away from the wall. "Symbolic?" Briggs nodded, hesitant. "A demonstration. Show of force, no mass casualties." Silence. Then Riker said, "Tell them to write a speech, and give it to the next commander, because I won't be reading it." At 1900 hours, Riker walked into the command deck. The crew stood at attention. No alarms, no red lights, just an atmosphere that felt like the calm before a crucifixion. Riker looked each of them in the eye, then said, "We do this clean. Surgical. One strike, one lesson. Then we vanish. They'll expect wrath. Instead, we give them precision." He turned to Raven. "Target, Jarrell Spire. Their military command station orbiting the Council homeworld. Launch sequence." Rod's only Raven responded calmly. "Targeting confirmed. Orbital kinetic deployment. Estimated surface casualty, 0. Estimated infrastructure loss, 89%. Fire." The rod dropped from Leviathan's underbelly like a ghost falling from heaven. There was no light, no sound, just impact. The Jarrell Spire, home to the Council's entire military coordination network, was gone in 1.3 seconds. Not vaporized, removed. The galaxy saw it on pirate feeds, on hacked stations, on rebel channels. A structure once praised as the brain of peace now existed only as shattered alloy and vacuum. And still, Riker didn't say a word. But the Council did. And it wasn't what anyone expected. They surrendered? Number. They lied. They broadcasted a faked recording of Riker confessing to war crimes. A deep fake of his voice, spliced from old transmission fragments, aired across over 300 systems. "We are not here for peace. We are here to dominate." And some believed it. The weak ones, the scared, the obedient. But the rest? They didn't need Riker's voice anymore. They'd heard it in the silence, in the restraint, in the singular strikes that punished power but spared civilians. Earth wasn't here to conquer. Earth was here to remind them of what happens when you back a cornered species into silence for centuries, and then pretend to be shocked when they rise. But it came at a cost. When Wraith 3 returned from its mission, its stealth grid had been compromised by an unknown Council tech prototype, something new, something dangerous. The ship made it back. The pilot didn't. Captain Reeve Maddox, the man who'd risked everything to expose Council crimes, was found slumped in the cockpit, eyes burned out, brain seared by a feedback virus that tunneled through the neural link. His last recorded words? "Tell Riker it worked." They saw everything. His hands were still clenched on the controls, still guiding Wraith 3 home, even dead. When Briggs delivered the news, Riker didn't flinch. He just whispered, "Another name for the wall." That night, alone in the observation chamber, Riker stared out at a galaxy forever changed. He'd lost friends, he'd buried peace, and now the Council would never forget Earth. Not because of Leviathan's size, not because of their fear, but because humanity had done what empires never expect. They stayed quiet, They stayed focused, and when pushed far enough, they hit harder than gods. The council didn't fall with a bang. It fractured quietly, splinter by splinter, alliance by alliance, not in fire, but in fear. What centuries of politics, treaties, and manipulation had built collapsed under the weight of one undeniable fact. They had lost control. Not to a superior fleet, not to a godlike empire, but to a species they'd once mocked as apes, a species that had bled, evolved, and stopped asking for a seat at the table. Now Earth was the table, and everyone knew it. Across the galactic rim, council systems declared autonomy one by one, some in revolt, some in shame, some out of sheer survival instinct. The Solari Combine removed all council envoys and replaced their banners with plain black cloth. No flag, no emblem, just mourning for their own blindness. The Trinari Enclave executed 3 of its former council liaisons, streamed live with only one message spoken between deaths. For the Meridian. On the planet Braxunar, a council-founded science colony, the entire leadership surrendered control to Earth Command without a single demand. No conditions. Just an apology. Riker never asked for any of it. He didn't broadcast victory speeches, didn't parade ships through systems, didn't demand tributes or declarations of loyalty. He just watched. From the bridge of the Leviathan, orbiting the now-abandoned council capital, surrounded by debris and ghost signals, he watched the galaxy turn inward. And then, finally, Earth Command asked the question they'd been avoiding. The message came encoded in Raven's secure core, marked CIV-001-phase. Riker stood as the AI recited Earth's proposal. Commander Riker, the Terran Assembly requests the formal deployment of the Leviathan fleet as a stabilizing force. The Council's collapse has left a vacuum. Earth is now the dominant power. We ask you to consider forming a Terran-led coalition. With Earth at its center, Riker said nothing. If we do not fill the void, Raven continued, someone else will. And we may not like what grows in the dark. He finally looked up. Send them my response. Recording. Riker stepped forward, hands behind his back. To the Terran Assembly. We did not build Leviathan to rule. We built it so we'd never kneel again. The Council is dead, not because we killed it, but because its lies couldn't survive the truth. That truth is this. Power isn't what terrifies the galaxy. Conviction is. And we had it. When no one listened, when we were alone, when they chained us with law and laughed behind closed doors, we still believed in ourselves. So no, I won't form a coalition. I won't replace one empire with another. I'll leave that to those still hungry for thrones. Leviathan will remain where it is, in orbit, in silence, a reminder. Earth stands. That's enough. Let the galaxy learn what it means to stand on its own, without gods, without masters, without empires. If they come for us again, we'll remind them. But until then, we watch, we wait, we rebuild. That's the human way he ended the recording. Raven didn't say anything. For once, even the AI had no suggestions, only acknowledgement. Message archived and transmitted. Months passed. Then a year. The Leviathan became a myth. It no longer moved. It didn't need to. Just the presence of it, hanging in orbit above what was once the Council's proudest system, was enough to maintain peace. Rogue fleets halted mid-jump. Pirate syndicates chose new routes. Uprisings collapsed under rumors that the commander is watching. No one had proof, but no one wanted to find out. Riker rarely spoke now. He didn't need to. His actions had said more than words ever could. Sometimes Miles would join him at the observation deck, silence stretching between them, both of them watching a galaxy that had finally stopped laughing at Earth. One night, Miles broke the quiet. You ever think about going home? Riker didn't answer right away. Then, "This is home now." Miles nodded. "Do you regret it?" Riker's jaw clenched. He thought of Ava, of Maddox, of Alvarez, of the Meridian. He looked out at the stars. No. A new diplomatic network formed, the Open Alliance, not run by Earth, not controlled, just monitored. They adopted a simple creed carved into the station walls of their neutral meeting world. No voice denied, no lie protected, no chain unseen. They offered Riker a seat at the inaugural summit. He declined. But he sent a single sentence in reply. "Let truth keep what force earned." One day, a ship approached Leviathan without broadcasting credentials. Old, slow, patched with scrap and desperation. It hailed Riker directly. He allowed it through. A young captain appeared on the holo, barely 30, nervous but resolute. "I'm not here to threaten. I just wanted to see you." Riker nodded once. The young man continued. "You scared the hell out of the galaxy, sir. But you also woke us up. You gave people something to believe in again." Riker said nothing. "But now we're scared of ourselves. We don't want to become what the Council was." Riker finally answered, "Then don't." "But how?" "Start with this. Don't forget why we fought." The transmission ended. The ship left. In time, Earth returned to quiet. Its fleets shrank. Its people stopped living in fear. They didn't rule the stars, but they mattered in them now. And that was enough. On the 3rd anniversary of the Meridian Massacre, Riker stood alone in the Leviathan's internal memorial chamber. No names on walls, no grand statues, just a single black terminal listing every crew member who had died since Earth's first contact with the Council. He tapped the screen. Ava Tran, Reeve Maddox, James Alvarez. He added one final line at the bottom. "We asked for peace." They gave us silence. So we answered as he turned to leave. Raven whispered, "Commander?" "Yes?" "Are we still at war?" Riker looked around the ship. It was alive, humming, vigilant, unchanged. "No," he said. "We just remember better than they do." "And if they forget?" Riker stared out at the void, steel in his voice. "Then we remind them,"